I'm starting off in the dashboard for one of our project managers. This is typically where TerraTrak launches when someone logs in. As I don't manage projects or habitat enhancement projects anyway, I don't have anything populated in here, but I'm viewing the data for one of our project managers. And there's very easy access to all of the active work efforts he has, any open invoices. If we were in planting season, there would be a lot of material requests in here that he's put out in an attempt to acquire plants from our bulk plant purchases for his specific projects. Yeah, and kind of this has become the go-to screen for all of the users in Clean Water Services instance of TerraTrak to see kind of what's going on currently and what needs their attention. So this is really, really helpful and has replaced a lot of email notifications back and forth between people. So throughout the system, and this has been a really huge benefit to us, contracted tasks and rates that we perform on our projects are specified by multi-year master agreements that our organization has with a number of different contractors. And kind of on the more back-end area of the system that I help administer, they're housed in this area, and the tasks and rates are specified for a given rate period, which usually spans one or more fiscal years. For the purposes of this demo, we made up a contractor with rates and tasks so that we weren't providing that information publicly, but you can kind of get in here for this particular contractor that we have, see the rate periods. All of these tasks are specified in multi-year master agreements. So every contractor is bid on the same rate or the same tasks, and we have specified rates for both work that's done outside of the Oregon's Bureau of Labor. So we have a couple different rate categories specified depending on whether we need to specify prevailing wage rates for a particular work effort or just the regular cost of those tasks. Kind of getting into where we actually do all the work within TerraTrak. I'm looking now at our Wapato View project, which is underneath the Wapato View site. And to differentiate sites and projects, I think of sites more as essentially like a collection of tax lots or parcels where we have agreements in place to do specific work. And that work is contained within a project. And they're defined with certain goals, and all of the work that's done is tied to one or more of these individual projects underneath a site. Looking over at this portion of the screen, hopefully you can see my mouse moving around. There's a number of sashes that can be expanded to display far more information about any of these particular topics. I find it often easier, especially if I'm going to a particular section, to collapse all of these so that I can see them all and navigate between them pretty easily. But they are totally expandable. And kind of walking through this quickly, we've got some basic information about the project, which may typically span multiple years, even decades, depending on where we want to go with this. We're able to specify the project manager, a peer reviewer. So all of our work efforts that are created for the contracted activities actually go through another project manager to make sure that the tasks that are specified are applicable for the goals. And we have a couple of really experienced project managers that help others out in that respect. There's kind of a step involved in the workflow that allows somebody else to take a look at it before we just send somebody out to do work. And then we specify a department manager whose main role is responsible for approving this work given budget constraints. We can also track a lot of information about contacts within our organization or other external contacts. We partner with a lot of external agencies on our projects, including Metro. Metro owns a lot of property within Washington County, and we do a lot of the revegetation on their behalf. So having this available, if someone's out of the office, another staff member can log into TerraTrak, go to the project. If there's project-specific questions, they'll know who to contact. And then stepping through the rest of this project planning stage is where we're going to be able to estimate spending for fiscal years coming up. We're just now getting ready to turn that on in advance of July 1, which will be our fiscal year 18 turnover. It gives project managers the ability to estimate spending across various project stages. So we could go as far down as looking at design and engineering, permitting, construction for, say, trails or stream reconfiguration. And then we get into some of the stages that are more tailored to our revegetation efforts. So prepping the site by doing invasive weed treatments, and then getting into the actual planting and establishment of the site, which is usually like spot sprays and much smaller weed treatments, planting activities, that sort of thing. And then per our spending categories for each of these stages, project managers can put in the estimated budgets, submit that to the department manager, and get approval for those budgets, which then constrains all of the work efforts and the materials that they're going to put on that project to the approved budget, which is really nice. And we've been really lacking in that previously. We've had a lot of, we have budget estimates, but they're not tremendously accessible, and having the ability to do this within this system, as well as look across projects for any particular funding source that we may have internally to track budgets, is going to be hugely helpful in this coming year. This is something that's currently in development, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Throughout the system, we have specific places where we're able to upload documents. This is kind of a catch-all for some of the planning documents and things, and this is incredibly helpful, kind of getting back to the decentralized data slide that we had before. Having a file folder with paper copies of all the files and trying to look through that to get this information was hugely time consuming and inefficient. So now we're able to house all of the documentation that we have for a particular project or site right here within the system for easy retrieval. Getting down to the work efforts, you can see that for this project, we've got 4 work efforts put in the system currently. You can see start and end dates, who the contractor's with, the status of all of those, who the manager is, when it was approved, and a tremendous amount of overview information about all the work efforts that we've done for a particular project, consolidated into a nice, neat area within the system. I'll dig into a couple of these that we prepared for the demo right here. So looking over in this navigation tree, we've kind of gone from the site level down into a specific project, and now we're looking at one of the 4 work efforts that we have for this project. Again, they're organized into sashes, and typically when you create a new work effort, or when you're going through any of these processes, they're logically laid out. So you start at the very beginning in the basic section and just kind of work your way down. You got work effort names, when the work is scheduled to start and end. I'll also note up here, there's this is really helpful. There's a lot of contextual information that's provided within TerraTrak. These green check marks means that any required field up here that is necessary for moving on to another step has been completed. If you hover over this, you'll get some information about the roles that can complete these items and whether it's complete or not. If it's not complete, there will be a red X, and it actually tells you why it's not complete, which is really helpful from my perspective, providing support to other users here. It serves as a great way to provide self-help. If you can't figure out why you need to progress to the next section, often just hovering over those will give you information about what is incomplete and needs to be done. Additionally, there's little kind of generic hover-overs that provide descriptions of what this section means and what type of data is appropriate to be in there. So again, for each work effort, we have a section of contacts, and this pre-populates based on those users that were specified in at the project level. So because we had populated the project manager, peer reviewer, and manager at the project level, this work effort then pulls in that information. But we do have flexibility so that we can change these as needed on an individual work effort basis. And there's a lot of places within the system that do the same thing to help facilitate data entry. Moving down a little bit, we get into our contractor selection section. So we've selected the welcome back water contractor that we created for the demo. We can provide comments on why we chose that contractor for this particular work effort. The contractor contacts are available, so we know who within that contractor organization is responsible for actually doing the work, what their point of contact is, and we can provide contact information, phone numbers, emails that are all tracked kind of on the back-end administration side within here, which is really helpful, especially if a project manager is on vacation, somebody needs to contact the contractor that's working on a specific project. All of that information is in here, providing a great deal of transparency throughout the department and allowing us to answer questions and resolve issues much more quickly than we had been able to in the past. In addition to just providing some notes about the contractor selection, we have some defined justifications that our legal department likes us to use to indicate why this contractor was specified for this particular project. And again, these are very similar to Metro's, and they were customized to reflect our legally agreed upon contractor selection justification categories.
Ryan, if I could jump in for a second.
Yeah.
This is one example of an area where I believe your workflow got a little smoother, more efficient, that having TerraTrak and the ability at the end of this process to be able to evaluate contractors, report on that contractor evaluation, resulted in the contractor selection justification process becoming a little smoother and easier for you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one example of where we were very intimately involved with our legal department and working through the customization of this to make sure that what we were doing was acceptable to them. And it's provided much improved workflows. We were working with Excel and Word-based templates to create these work efforts previously. They were disconnected, so essentially it was up to the user to select a contractor, provide justification, select all the tasks, and then copy and paste that into a Word template that became the contract. And hopefully they didn't overwrite the template. They provided the right data. They didn't get confused and save it as the wrong name. This process has greatly simplified the review that we do of these, both at the department manager level and on our legal team as well, because they're just entering the information in here, and then the contract is being populated by the data that were entered. So there's no ambiguity about or discrepancy between what was put in here and what actually shows up on the contract. So now it's not a question of having to read everything word for word to make sure that it was all put together correctly. We just get a report at the end that has all the information that was put in and was both peer reviewed and accepted by the managers. And I'll get into more detail on that in just a little bit. This area is where we select those tasks that I was showing you before. So back over on here, we have a bunch of tasks that the contractor's approved to do. They've bid on rates, they've been accepted. And we have the rates locked in for a specific period. Moving back over here, it's just a matter of, you can probably go through this, adding a task, so this drop-down menu mirrors what I was just showing you, and there's no way that a user can select something that wasn't approved by doing this. The TerraTrak provides so much validation of the data that was entered. It's really helped in the review of these things and making everything consistent across all of our work efforts. And we, just to give you a sense of scale, we typically cut several hundred work efforts in a fiscal year. And this process has dropped the amount of time from creating them to getting signatures from probably a couple weeks to a couple days. In going through this, we've also adopted some internal processes that are helpful, which is mostly in using DigiSign to electronically send these prepared contracts to our contractors for signature. Instead of having to mail multiple copies and having them returned to and putting the paper copies into a folder and scanning the rest so that the project managers have them. Right now, we're also working on the budgeting, which helps us provide project level budgets specific to our multiple funding sources that we have, depending on whether they're coming out of a capital or operating budget. We have a number of codes that we're tracking all of this information to. And we can see which funding sources were applied to this particular work effort. Oftentimes we'll have multiple funding sources depending on the work being done and whether or not we're getting reimbursed from another organization for doing work as a partnership with them, how much of the work effort was applied to each of those budgets, and then what the total funding allocation was from that.
Brian,
yes.
Just a quick question. So the budgeting that you just showed here, is that part of the site management module, or is it part of the budget module that you guys just rolled out in 2017?
I can take that one.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so the site management includes the project definition and the work effort, creating the work effort, and then the budget module is an additional module that for CWS we're turning on for FY18 starting July 1st. And that additional module supports defining a budget for the project, as well as tracking budget across the entire program by funding source. So turning it on for the project level budgets, it allows the division manager to delegate X amount of budget to this project. And that way the division manager can kind of step up a level and just manage projects or budgets across projects without having to necessarily keep track of all the details on each individual work effort. The project manager then takes on some of that responsibility of keeping track of all the individual work efforts and material requests. So helps to kind of separate and delegate responsibility.
Thank you.
So once the project managers kind of identified all of the tasks and the funding to perform those tasks on a project, they'll upload a map of the project area so that we'll have that in the contract, and I'll show you that a little bit further along just for the sake of time here. And this gets the work effort to a stage where it's ready for peer review. Once the project manager submits it for peer review, the person that's defined as the peer reviewer gets an email notification. I believe it also shows up on their dashboard as something that needs attention. And those notifications serve to expedite this process. So as soon as the peer reviewer gets a notification, they'll go in here, review the work that's going to be done, make sure it's applicable to the project, and then specify whether or not they have any conditions for the approval. In this case, this one was good to go. They agree with the tasks that were selected. They select no, hit approve, and it goes over to the department manager just to double check that the funding sources that were provided and the budget that's required to do these tasks is acceptable. And then they approve it. It goes on to the next stage with our administrative assistant getting a notification. This process, we haven't been able to integrate fully with the rest of the organization, like for our finance department and our legal departments. So currently this is a bit of a manual process outside of TerraTrak, but our admin assistant will work with finance. Actually at this stage, they'll work with legal to get a unique contract number for that work effort, which they put in. And then as soon as that's ready to go, they'll generate contractor instructions, which are that this serves as the contract to do the work with our contractors. And I'll just open this up and go through it. We had a review process with our legal department to get this wording correct and make sure that all of the information that was needed was included on here, such as that contract number that was just included, an expiration date, to not exceed amount, as well as contacts for clean water services and the contractor that we're doing work with. Again, all of this comes straight from the system, and that's a huge improvement to what we had before, whereas people were trying to create this in Excel and then copy and paste it into a Word document that legal really had to scrutinize to make sure that everything was done correctly in the process. Now it's generally accepted that any of these documents that come out of TerraTrak follow our formatting and have the data that's required to get this out. The site
Brian,
yes.
It looks like the PDF or the thing that you popped open, it's all kind of grayed out. I don't think there's probably a way that we can remedy that for this call, but maybe kind of explain what's there, or just know that it's hard to, you can't see it.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it says that I need to move this away from the shared application. So that's interesting. Well, I'll close that. And essentially all of the information that we've entered, this contract number, the tasks and the rates, and then going all the way back up to the basic information, the start and end dates, were all included on there, as well as some boilerplate language that refers to, you know, who's held responsible and all these other things that legal wanted on there, as well as it takes a copy of this sitemap that was uploaded, and I don't know if that will show up. No, it doesn't look like it, but essentially it's a map of the project area. So that way there's no confusion about where the contractors are supposed to perform the work. And this has been really helpful as well, if we have a task that requires herbicide usage, such as this hourly spray task, we, actually that's getting down into the invoicing, we also append a spray log to the contract. So the contractor has a current version of our spray log, a map of where to perform the work, and all of the information that's needed on both sides to get that work out. After the work's been performed, we kind of get into the invoicing side for this particular work effort. I guess I'll stop opening these since they don't appear to show up, but one of the requirements we have for any spray work that's been done is a completed spray log needs to be submitted with each invoice that the contractor provides. So when we get an invoice back, we also get a spray log, and that spray log goes directly into the system here. That way, for if we were ever audited by the state and required to provide information on the pesticide application that we have, all of that information is housed in here, and we can get back to it. The admin assistant, once the contract's created, works with finance to get a purchase order number for this contract. She puts that in here, and then as the project manager receives invoices from the contractor, a couple of things happen. The spray log will get uploaded, and then for each invoice, we'll enter some data. We're able to partially invoice tasks, which happens occasionally. The contractor may only be able to do a portion of the work that's specified, or even a portion of a given task. So if we have, these are both hourly tasks, but we also have tasks that are based on per acre rates. And if a contractor is only able to do 20 acres of the 40 acres and they want to invoice us for that this month, and then the remaining 20 acres the next month, we're able to do that. So on each invoice, we select the tasks that are on the invoice that we receive, how many units had been done of that work for each. And here you can see this was a partial invoice. We had specified 25 hours of hourly spray work, and the contractor is currently only invoicing us for 10 of those. So we put that in. We don't have to worry about the rates because those are specified, and all of the money, all of the finance information just pulls over from those rates that were already specified. There's no need for the project managers to worry about that. And this also provides a means to compare what our system assumes these tasks would have cost based on those rates and the actual invoice amount that the contractor has on the invoice. So there's a check within TerraTrak to make sure that the contractor is actually charging us the correct amount. We also have the ability to track materials that were used by the contractor on the sites. In this case, it looks like we may have sprayed some glyphosate out there. This ideally would go on the spray task, but we are able to capture this. How many units were used and what the cost was. This provides a tremendous amount of data that we didn't have before, tracking in great detail any chemicals that were used. And now we know when they were used, where they were used, and in what quantity. This section kind of gets down to all of the tasks overall. Because we're able to just partially invoice, it's possible that we may have overestimated the number of units that were required to do the work. In this instance, if we were fully invoiced out, we had specified like 25 hours of hourly spray, but we only did 10. This allows us to mark that task as complete so that we can close this out later on. I think probably in the interest of time, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit going through the rest of this. Most of these areas have a closeout process. So at some point, we no longer want to do any work on this, and we kind of want to archive this work effort, get it off of the project manager's dashboard as something that's active, and make sure everything was completed, and just put it out of their minds. And this will certainly come in towards the end of the fiscal year. We'll be closing out a lot of work efforts that were specific to just one fiscal year. This one's not able to be closed out right now, and you can see that the contractor evaluation section hasn't been completed. Here's who can enter that information and what information needs to be provided to complete that. It kind of gets us to the end of the work effort, and hopefully through the contracting and invoicing section. Steve, is there anything else that you want to add that I may have missed going through there?
No, I think you covered projects and work efforts, the core of the site management.
Okay. I think with that, for the sake of time, we might be able to move along.
Well, thank you. I'll resume sharing the few remaining slides that we have. That was really informative. Let's see. Okay. So I think you can all see the screen, correct?
Yeah.
And then you had a few additional slides. Brian, do you want to still address these briefly?
Yeah, I think I can go through these pretty quickly. So
okay.
Margaret, our plant manager, did a full webcast on this, I believe, about a year ago. So there's far more detail here, but just to kind of show you the other end, we're mostly focused on the materials that go to the projects and then the contracted work that we do on those projects. So getting into the material side, this is just the main material inventory grid showing all of the species we have, how many we have on hand at a given location, how many we have on order, and then how many of those have been allocated to projects already. It allows her to really easily go through and look at all the requests and allocate plants where necessary.
Next slide, right?
Yes. And so back looking again at a project within a site, we were looking at the work effort portion previously. Now there's another section for material requests that show all of the plants that have been requested, how many there are, as well as all the cost information. And again, this is all tracked to a funding source that we have set up. We also implemented a calendar view of all of those material requests that show plant delivery and pickup timing per location, because we have a couple different plant locations that we receive inventory into. And that's allowed for much tighter scheduling and greater efficiency of staff time being able to go out to these various locations. And so hopefully we're getting towards this with the work effort information and the financial information we have overall for these projects. This is an example of visualizing the data that we've exported out of TerraTrak for plants. We have 7.5 million plants recorded in TerraTrak going back about 10 years. And currently, because we have a defined planting season, I'll export that data at the end of the season and integrate it with information that we have internally, and then update these to provide all of our internal staff numbers on what we've been doing. This is just an example of the integration using that same data set, but visualizing it a little bit differently. It allows project managers to go into a specific project and see not only how many plants have been put out there per year, but what the stock type was. And you can even dig down into each individual species, seeing how many of a particular species had gone out and in what form.